Okay. Hello. I wanted to make a kind of a standard assessment guideline when it comes to writing, um, as there is a lot of since we have a lot of faculties, all of them they grade papers in different way, and when a student who is attending someone else's batch is assessed by someone else, there is always a kind of variance in the grades that they or in the bands that they receive. um, so you can see this as a guideline. On an average, I want a faculty to check 6 papers in an hour. That will be 10 minutes for each paper, and that would ensure that all the papers are checked on Saturday itself, and or on Monday, and it's not carry forwarded for too long. Now, I understand that on an average, students write anywhere between um, 500 to 600 words um, when you combine task 1 and task 2. So it might not be possible to analyze each and every sentence while ensuring that a proper time is allocated for evaluating each response of students. What we want, or what I expect from faculties, is that you give them a generic response, right? So the students, there are different levels when it comes to their English language ability or their ability to to clear IELTS exam. Someone who is at a 5 band level, or let's say 5.5 band level, uh, it's not worth investing too much time into analyzing the writing that they have done. So for example, a student is making mistake in this, or a particular student does not know how to write complex sentences, um, and you have made a note in their essay that, okay, please learn how to make complex sentences. Now, unless and until that student solves that first hurdle or clears the first hurdle, there is no point in making a long list of points. So ideally speaking, I would encourage each and every faculty to at least mention 3 comments on how a particular student can improve their score. Whenever a faculty is underlining something, all right, um, if it's a spelling mistake, that can be self-explanatory, so you can just circle the word and a student would understand that, okay, fine, this is a spelling mistake. They can always check those things online. But when you underline something, students, most of them, I would say like 80% of our students, they fail to understand why a faculty might have underlined it. So when you underline, you need to write what is the problem with the phrase or a sentence which you have underlined. Okay, so as I said, point number 1, make sure that there are 3 comments. Point number 2, make sure that any mistake that you have highlighted apart from vocabulary is explained, if not in detail, briefly. And the third thing is that now, for example, I have just listed some important points for essay. Okay, now what I want is that obviously a student who is in, if someone has written a pristine level of essay, then obviously that would need to be checked more thoroughly. But most of our essays, by using these 10 points, you can make your life easy and be more productive while checking the essays, right? So the first thing obviously I want you guys to see is that whether there is an introduction, a body paragraph, and a conclusion. Second thing is that stand is clear in the introduction itself, so it's not that student has to choose students, they have to choose a stand. What I'm saying is that their structure needs to be cleared up in the introduction itself, whether if it's an argumentative essay, whether they're going to agree with it, whether they're going to disagree with it, whether they're going to take a middle stand, whatever might be their stand, it needs to be clear in the introduction. Third thing is spelling mistakes. If a student has made spelling mistakes which are rare, so to be very honest, if the let's say the essay is about something related to transportation, and student has written the word commute, right? So he has used this word commute twice. Once he has got the spelling right, the other time he has got it wrong. So this necessarily does not mean that the student does not know the spelling for commute. It can be a writing error rather than a vocabulary error. So a faculty needs to analyze that is a student making consistent mistakes with the spelling. If that is the case, then they'll obviously won't check mark this particular point. Next one is correct pronouns are used to increase cohesion. I always tell students when I take a class that unless and until, apart from obviously the first sentence of any paragraph, if the following sentences are not interconnected, that means they have not done a good work on cohesion. So if a student has written, let's say the topic is about reducing traffic congestion, and student has written governments should increase fuel prices in order to reduce its consumption, and the other one has written government should increase fuel prices, full stop. Increase in the fuel price would lead to the reduction in consumption. So obviously the first student, since they have written a complex sentence and also they have used a pronoun, they'll score more. Okay, so that is something that we are looking for. Number 5 is contextual vocabulary. Now, as I mentioned, contextual vocabulary is something like, for example, I use the word commute. If the essay is about transportation and a student is able to use the word commute, that's a contextual vocabulary. Students should be able to use words which are relevant to the topic which is being discussed in the essay. If they can come up with those words, extremely well. If not, then obviously this point will not be ticked. Number 6, minimum 2 strong points are mentioned in the body paragraph. A lot of times students, they choose points to support their argument or discussion, but those points might not be true 100% of the time. So as a faculty, when you are checking a paper, I want you guys to see that if a student has made a point, does that point hold true 100% of the time? If not, has the student established a boundary within which it would prove 100% true? So let me give you an example. Let's continue the example of the transportation essay, right? So the government should increase the price. Do you agree or disagree? The student, let's say, has agreed. Yes, government should increase the price. Increase in the price would lead to reduction in consumption or usage. To support that, the student has written a point, right? So the supporting point, this particular, let's say a student has written something like increase in the price of fuel would make it unaffordable to people, so they will be forced to use public transportation. Now my question is it true 100% of the time? Obviously not, because there are rich people who can still afford fuel. However, if a student would have written something like increase in the fuel cost will make it inaccessible for most of the population, then it would be true, because, well, let's face it, most of the population is poor, not all of them. All right, so that's something that faculty needs to see when so I personally call it establishing a boundary or establishing a subset within which those arguments they hold true. So if I say if all the rapists are hanged, people will stop raping someone. Well, do you think that holds true 100% of the time? I don't think so. Why? Because, well, there will be still weird people who will do weird things. However, if I just use the word sane, so I would write, if rapists are hanged, then sane people who are logical will think twice before committing a rape. So that's something that, that's what I call establishing a boundary. I guess you got the general gist of it, and see if your students can do the same. Number 7 is student has not gone off topic. This is very common, especially with the students who are at 6 band level. Their bands, it fluctuates between 5.5 and 6.5, because sometimes they are able to assess the topic properly, and sometimes they're not able to do so. So obviously I want you to make sure that student has not gone off topic a lot. Number 8, student has paraphrased the information in conclusion. This is one of the tricky parts. A lot of times students, they just repeat what they have written in introduction. See if they have written it in a different way in conclusion. If so, you can check mark this particular point as well. Word count is about 250. It's obviously a most common thing. And number 10 is error-free complex sentences are used. Now, if all the 10 points are followed, you can just give 6.5 bands to the student. If 7 of them are followed, you can give them 6. If 50% are followed, you can give them 5.5. And if only 3 of them are followed, you can give them 5 bands. And if none of them are followed, give them 3 to 4 bands. It doesn't matter. Now, only give 7 bands or above to a student if the essay is pristine or flawless, and there are rare idioms which are used, strong points which are made, and the conclusion itself is quite strong. Now obviously this is for task 2, but the same thing can be applied to task 1 as well. All right. So the task 1 will not have a conclusion, obviously, for academic students, but for general students it would have a sign of sentence. But the task 1 for academic students would have an overview. So it will be whether there is an introduction, whether there is an overview, and whether there is a body paragraph for academic students. And for general students, it will be introduction, body, and a sign of sentence. As far as body is concerned, for general students in task 1, for each and every point which is mentioned in the question, they should have written a separate paragraph. Okay, so hopefully this will clear a bit of ambiguity which is existing right now between faculties and their assessment of writing, because sometimes what happens is that a student will get 5.5 bands on 1 week, and immediately in the next week they'll get like 6.5 or 7. That will throw them off their game, and they'll start doubting the faculties as well as the institution, assuming that assuming that we are not maintaining a consistency when it comes to checking the paper. So as I said, please see that some sort of consistency is there amongst the faculty, so as to ensure a more leveled assessment of mock test papers. Thank you. I hope you guys are having a good time. I'll be back in November, and I hope to see you all then. Thank you. Bye.